Hope you're having a good day today. It is September 2nd. Our reading today takes us backwards, at least not necessarily chronologically, but somewhat chronologically. Our reading actually takes us back to First Chronicles today. And the program that we're following along, if you're following along with us through the app or whatever it may be, which I know a lot of folks aren't. But anyway, the only reason I say that is to say this isn't necessarily how I would do it, jumping all over the place, but this is how this program is. Anyway, I'll stop making excuses now. And to get back to it, if I can, there we go. Hopefully we'll do better. What today's reading is, pardon me for not being as prepared as I need to, is a whole bunch of genealogies. And a lot of the genealogies end with speaking about the captivity. So it really is genealogy from Jacob's sons all the way to the captivity. And so that's the reason that it's put where it is in our reading program. And it's all genealogy in our reading today. And you're probably thinking, well, what in the world are we going to say about the genealogies? Well, there's a little tidbit that I noticed, and it's around chapter 5. In chapter 5, at verse 18, let's just read some. The sons of Reuben, the Gadites, half the tribe of Manasseh. Okay, now where this is the ones on the other side of the Jordan. Okay, so these aren't on the, pardon this phrase, the good side of the tracks. These are the ones over there. And all through their history, sometimes there were different issues over there. And I'm not saying they were bad. I'm just saying just the fact that they're on the other side of the Jordan, sometimes there were things that happened because of that. But anyway, so that's who we're talking about. So, sons of Reuben, the Gadites, the half-tribe of Manasseh, had 44,760 valiant men, men able to bear shield and sword, to shoot with the bow, and skillful in war, who went to war. So you can tell who we're talking about. It's like these guys are gung-ho. They made war with the Hagrites, Jetur, Nephish, and Nodab. And they were helped against them, and the Hagrites were delivered into their hand, and all who were with them, for they cried out to God in the battle. He heeded their prayer because they put their trust in him. Then they took away their livestock, 50,000 of their camels, 250,000 of their sheep, and 2,000 of their donkeys, also 100,000 of their men. For many fell dead because the war was God's, and they dwelt in their place until the captivity. So there's one of the places where it shows up. But I wanted to just look at this account, and I appreciated it because, as it says, they made war, which the Lord commanded. The war was God's, and they were helped against them, for they cried out to God in the battle. They cried out to God in the battle. You know, sometimes we'll make the point that you don't wait until you're in the thick of the battle to cry out to God. But at the same time, if you find yourself in the thick of the battle, who should you cry out to? God. That God heard them as they cried out, as it says in the account, for they cried out to God in the battle. He heeded their prayer because they put their trust in him. So they cried out in the battle. That's the first point I wanted to make. The second is this. These were mighty men. They were valiant men, able to bear the shield and the sword, to shoot with the bows. They were skillful in war. Right? These were the soldiers, and they made war. But even though they were so valiant, I think we can show just from this passage that man's might does not win the war. These men were valiant, they were skilled, they were warriors, but unless they cried out to God and put their trust in him, they are not going to win that battle. They're not going to win that war. Man's might does not prevail. They had to put their trust in God. Now, did they have to do their part? Certainly. But it's by God's grace and mercy. It's by God's strength. It's not man's might. It's not man's might. And so we look at the account and we see what they had to do. That they had to, as it says, they were helped against them. They made war. They were mighty. They were mighty men. But at the same time, the mighty prayed. And the mighty put their trust in the Lord. And the mighty worked along with their faith. Faith without works, James chapter 2. Faith with works, I should say. And that they prevailed. Because God prevailed. The war was God's. Now, what I noticed and what's interesting in all these genealogies, and there's a lot of genealogies in today's reading, but I want you to come over to chapter 7 to contrast this with Ephraim. With Ephraim down in verse 20. The sons of Ephraim were Shuthelah, Bered his son, Tahath his son, Elahad his son, Tahath his son, Zabad his son, Shuthelah his son, Azer and Eliad. The men of Gath who were born in that land killed them because they had come down to take away their cattle. You know, one of the questions is, who are these pronouns referring to? And namely, there in verse 21, because it says that in our previous passage, those on the other side, that they took possession of their cattle and their camels and all of those other things. Let me see if I actually have it in front of me. Hold on just a second. Yeah, it says they took away their livestock, sheep and donkeys, also 100,000 of their men. But here, the men of Gath, they killed the Ephraimites because they came down to take away their cattle. Now, is that the men of Gad came down to take away their cattle, or is that Ephraim came down to take away their cattle and Gath said nothing doing and killed them? Well, whatever the case, verse 22, then Ephraim their father mourned many days, and his brethren came to comfort him. I just thought it was an interesting contrast, because those on the other side of the Jordan, there is it speaks about the sons of Reuben, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. They put their trust in God. They prayed to God. That was God's war. And they prevailed with God. But the Ephraimites, they came home on their shields, in a sense. Hopefully you understand what that phrase means. Namely, they got whooped. They got killed. A lot of them got killed. Why? You might just think about that contrast. One people prayed, one people trusted, one people turned to the Lord, but these other people, I wonder if they weren't just trusting in their own might. I don't know, but I think it's an interesting contrast. Now, look back in the account, though. As Ephraim, their father, mourned many days, his brethren came to comfort him. And I wanted you to just see, seeing how this is a portion of genealogy. He went into his wife. She conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Beriah, because tragedy had come upon his house. And it was tragic. Now his daughter was Shirah, who built Lower and Upper Beth Horon, and Uzzen Shirah. Pardon me, I know I'm mispronouncing probably all sorts of stuff. And Repha was his son, as well as Resheph, and Telah his son, Tahan his son, Laodan his son, Ammihud his son, Elishama his son, Nun his son, and Joshua his son. And so we have followed the genealogy to the point of Joshua in the tribe of Ephraim. It was horrible what happened. Not sure I fully understand everything, just trying to give some ideas. But I know why the Lord was with those folks before, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and Manasseh, but this didn't go well. But nonetheless, through the lineage, eventually we're going to come through Ephraim's lineage. Eventually we're going to come to Joshua. And I just thought that was a kindness, despite what happened with Ephraim, that eventually there's going to be a man named Nun, and he's going to have a child named Joshua. And we know we know the role he's going to play. Appreciate you. Appreciate you following along with us. Hope you have a good day. Hope you join us for our next brief look into God's Word.